This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. The Biden administration stands accused today of one of the world's most glaring examples of government incompetence. 5G cell phone communications has been successfully deployed in over 40 countries. AT&T and Verizon turned on their 5G transmitters today in selected U.S. cities. 5G service in some of those American cities was curtailed near airports. That's because U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg utterly failed to prepare U.S. airports for the arrival of 5G. His incompetence has created a very serious air transportation safety crisis. Airline executives are furious with Buttigieg. Doc Burkhart and I have more on this story, plus news about the collapse of vaccine mandates around the world and an update on the very serious preparations in Eastern Europe for a possible war between Russia and NATO. This is getting worse by the day.
Yes.
We're going to start with the 5G. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this topic, but we just want to give you an update. We were ahead of everybody else years ago telling the American people that 5G was coming, and it is no longer coming. It's here.
Right.
AT&T and Verizon turned on their 5G transmission towers today in a number of cities, and so it has arrived. But the big story is the fact that the U.S. government, the Biden administration in particular, the Transportation Department led by Pete Buttigieg, has completely, utterly failed to prepare U.S. airports for the arrival of 5G transmissions, thus creating a very serious air transportation safety crisis. And I'm telling you, airline executives are furious with Pete Buttigieg, and they're not hiding their fury, and they're naming him as the culprit behind the mess. I want to put up on the screen, this is from CNBC. After years of 5G hype and investment, Wednesday's network launch makes it real.
Right. So Verizon and AT&T turned on a major new part of their 5G networks Wednesday. The culmination of a years-long process saw both carriers invest billions in spectrum and equipment to upgrade their networks. The networks that lit up on Wednesday are using wavelengths called C-band, cover a large part of the country with wireless service that should be noticeably faster than current 4G service. Verizon says 90 million people will get access to the new 5G service this month in major cities, including New York, LA, and San Francisco. AT&T says it plans to cover as many as 75 million people with its C-band network by the end of the year. But, of course, problems are popping up today. And so we have this story from the New York Post. AT&T and Verizon changed their 5G rollout plans after airlines protest. So what's happening is cell phone towers near airports are possibly interfering with the function of certain types of planes, especially older model planes that are still out there flying. And that's causing, of course, a great deal of concern for the airlines. This wasn't something that snuck up on the Biden administration at all.
In particular, it doesn't mean just the older aircraft. It's the altimeters that are being affected. And so the equipment on the airliners can be disrupted by the 5G transmissions, and the pilots will not know the altitude,
which is kind of important to know,
especially when you're landing over a major urban center. And so the airline companies are furious with the United States government.
In fact, a number of airlines have canceled flights on altered flights after the 5G rollout concern. So multiple international airlines canceled U.S.-bound flights scheduled for Wednesday as a planned rollout of 5G service prompted safety concerns. As we said, this shouldn't catch our audience by surprise, and it certainly shouldn't catch the Biden administration, the Pete Buttigieg pothole repair transportation secretary by surprise.
Well, Doc, Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg has spent most of his time breastfeeding his babies as a gay mother. Is he a mother or father? I don't know which role he is playing in that homosexual marriage, but they have babies which they did not produce. But he's been breastfeeding and nursing his babies and neglecting his duties as Secretary of Transportation. Now we have a major crisis. Airliners could crash because of Buttigieg's his incompetence. I mean, the man should resign today.
And where is he? Where is he? Have you seen Pete Buttigieg
guess he's
lately?
home nursing his babies. Where has he been for the transportation crisis with the shortages right now? You have major ports with containers and ships backed up for months. This has been going on for months. You have a trucking crisis. Where is the Secretary of Transportation?
You've got trains getting hijacked around the country for packages. That's a transportation issue too. Where is Pete Buttigieg?
He said, I'm just paraphrasing him, that as a gay parent, taking care of his babies was an important work function.
Okay.
I agree. Taking care of children in your family is important. But quit your job and go home and be a mom, Mr. Buttigieg. You want to be a mom? Be a full-time mom like real mothers. Go home and raise your children and get out of the government because you're incompetent. You don't know what you're doing. He absolutely doesn't know what he's doing. He's been AWOL almost the entire year.
Yes.
And this is Joe Biden's man. And they're talking about Buttigieg being a future vice president, possibly in 2024.
He was mayor of South Bend. Okay. Now, I asked you earlier, ever been to South Bend?
Yeah, sure, a nice city.
Yeah, it's a great city.
It's a small city.
But how do you go from fixing potholes in South Bend to being transportation secretary?
We don't even know if he fixed the potholes.
Yeah, right. If you're from South Bend, let us know. We're not the only ones that are critical of Mr. Buttigieg and his response to the current crisis. The president of Emirates Airlines is very upset about the situation. The president of Emirates has slammed the 5G fiasco as the most delinquent, irresponsible mess he has seen in his 50-year aviation career and blamed it on Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. This is number 6 for control, who he says knew about the impending chaos and did nothing to stop it. AT&T and Verizon launched their 5G network across America on Wednesday, switching on 4,500 towers to bring faster wireless to their customers. They had to hold back on 10% of the towers, 500, that are near airports because the frequencies the towers emit could interfere with the signal on some planes. 50 airports have buffers to protect it against it, but some major airports like Denver, Atlanta, Boston, Memphis, and Houston do not.
So have flights been canceled in these cities? 500 towers were not turned on near airports. That means, is it up to 500 airports? Are they not receiving flights today?
We already know that there are airlines that are canceling flights over things, but as somebody traveling on a plane, don't you want to know this information right now? This is how it concerned the president of Emirates Airlines was Sir Tim Clark. He spoke in an interview to CNN and really sounded off about this entire issue. Let's watch this.
The truth be known, we were not aware of this until yesterday morning, to the extent that it was going to compromise the safety of operation of our aircraft and just about every other 777 operator to and from the United States and within the United States. It came to a head. It was known by the US operators probably a little bit more than we knew, and we have evidence of letters have been written to the Secretary of Transport in the US government alerting that group to what was likely to happen and its consequences. So we were aware of a 5G issue, okay? We are aware that everybody is trying to get 5G rolled out. After all, it's the super cool future of whatever it may be, communication and information flow. We were not aware that the power of the antennas in the United States have been doubled compared to what's going on elsewhere. We were not aware that the antenna themselves had been put into a vertical position rather than a slanted position. So on that basis, we took that decision late last night to suspend all our services until we had clarity.
What do you make of this situation as somebody who what one might describe as sort of one of the elder statesmen of the industry? I guess that's a polite way of saying you've been around a while. But you've seen many things. What do you make of a situation where we can get to a position of 5G, which is in other European airports quite safely, and yet the way the rollout has been done in the United States has caused basically potential chaos?
I guess I need to be as candid as I normally am, and I'd say this is one of the most delinquent, utterly irresponsible issues, subjects, call it what you like, I've seen in my aviation career. Somebody should have told them a long time ago that it would compromise safety of operation of aircraft in metropolitan areas with catastrophic consequences if this was allowed to continue. I think that message got through at a very, very late stage, and that is why you see the suspension.
It's everything about the Biden administration reeks of incompetence.
Yes.
From
Everything.
Afghanistan to the rollout of 5G, it is incompetence in capital letters. Now, regardless of how you feel about 5G, and I know most of our audience is against 5G, but the point I'm making here today is the incompetence of Pete Buttigieg and the Biden administration in guaranteeing the safety of hundreds of thousands of air passengers coming into major airports. That you have the chief executive officer of a major world airline, Emirates, one of the best airlines in the world, just ripping into Buttigieg on CNN, CNN International.
Right.
That in itself is highly unusual for a corporate executive to name a U.S. government secretary and just blister him, calling him, grossly incompetent.
And for our audience to understand, they've rolled out 5G across a major portion of Europe. They've not had these issues in Europe.
Did you hear him say that they did not know that at Emirates, they did not know that the U.S. towers doubled their power?
And that they weren't operating at a slant. Obviously, at some point, some communication had been made or a decision had been made to increase power and to maintain the status quo. They're not having these issues in other places in the world, only here in the United States.
Well, that's because Biden's not running the rest of the world. It's just running the United States. Grossly incompetent. Nobody in the Biden administration knows what they're doing. Whatever you think about Donald Trump, can you imagine this happening under Donald Trump?
Oh my
Trump
goodness.
was a strong executive. This would not have happened under Trump. They would have had this taken care of. Biden appointed incompetent people. Biden himself is incompetent. And you have an incompetent government right now. It's what that said to me was, Rick, you don't want to fly for a while. I haven't flown for, 2 years now?
Right.
And I don't plan to fly anywhere in the near future after hearing that man talk about the safety of U.S. air travel in this country. It's very scary. Very scary. We'll show you some other things where things are falling apart for the ruling upper class. In Great Britain,
Big story today.
Boris Johnson has backed down. He is rescinding all of his draconian COVID restrictions on society. Why? Well, people are fed up with him. And in particular, more stories have come out about how Boris and his cabinet and his political cronies have been having drunken parties in secret.
Oh, no. They were work-related events.
Yeah, right. They've been having drinking parties while the people were locked down.
Yes.
And so he has no other choice than to say, well, I'll just end the restrictions and you can drink at your place. because he has been outed. And you know, how many times here in the United States have we seen politicians caught breaking the rules that they established on the people?
Oh, too many to count now. So
he's been caught at it. He's red-faced. He's embarrassed by it, and so he's ending the COVID lockdown restrictions because he can't stand in front of the people anymore and justify them.
that's right.
But he's on his way out. He's not going to last. One of the members of the Tory party today bolted and joined Labor.
Really?
And just said, Boris Johnson, please go, leave, resign.
So are you expecting a vote of no confidence pretty soon?
He's heading in that direction.
Well, this is Prime Minister Boris Johnson speaking to Parliament earlier today, basically ending their Plan B restrictions that they have firmly been following, except for...
So the virus is over.
Well...
It's not dangerous anymore.
It wasn't dangerous to begin with for them, Rick.
Yes, but yesterday it was dangerous.
But
today it's not dangerous.
Right.
What happened?
Politics.
He got caught being a hypocrite.
So.
Suddenly the virus isn't dangerous today. Let's watch it.
We can return to Plan A in England and allow Plan B regulations to expire. As a result, from the start of Thursday next week, mandatory certification will end. Organisations can, of course, choose to use the NHS COVID pass voluntarily, but we will end the compulsory use of COVID status certification in England. From now on, the government is no longer asking people to work from home. And people should now speak to their employers about arrangements for returning to the office. And having looked at the data carefully, the Cabinet concluded that once regulations lapse, the government will no longer mandate the wearing of face masks anywhere. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, from tomorrow we will no longer require face masks in classrooms, and the Department for Education will shortly remove national guidance on their use in communal areas. In the country at large, we will continue to suggest the use of face coverings in enclosed or crowded spaces, particularly when you come into contact with people you don't normally meet, but we will trust the judgment of the British people and no longer criminalise anyone who chooses not to wear one. The government will also ease restrictions further on visits to care homes, and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, will set out plans in the coming days. Mr. Speaker, as we return to Plan A, the House will know that some measures still remain, including those on self-isolation.
Well, the jig is up. The
Yes.
narrative is falling apart. They can't milk this crisis much longer. The people are done with it, and they know it. Their popularity is crashing. They've been exposed as hypocrites, and not just Boris Johnson. It's these people all over the world that have tried to hold on to power and increase their power by milking this man-made pandemic for all that they could get out of it. It is collapsing. Folks, we have won. We have beaten the propaganda offensive. Hallelujah. Pat yourself on the back.
Keep going. Keep resisting.
Yeah, pour it on.
Because we're on a roll now.
Now when you see people who are still into the propaganda mode, just kind of laugh and say, you still believe that stuff?
Well, one particular business that made a big deal out about having vaccine mandates for all of its global employees, Starbucks, the home of burnt coffee, is nixing its vaccine mandate now. They're saying after the Supreme Court ruling, but the Supreme Court ruling was a few days ago. So they had an opportunity to say something before now.
Well, Doc, what do you think changed the minds of the folks there at Starbucks?
I can just tell you right now, it's money. People quit going to Starbucks. They quit spending money at Starbucks.
But this was a vaccine mandate for their employees.
Yes, and also they need workers. That's the biggest thing right there.
Were they at the place where, in order to keep the mandate, they had to fire a substantial portion of their workforce?
Probably. And
what
then
I
they
think.
realized they couldn't sell burnt coffee to everybody.
And they weren't going to fall on their sword for Joe Biden. They just decided we like money.
Yes. So that's the heart of a real liberal there. They like money. So,
Well, how about is Biden backing down on truck drivers?
no, we are still going full speed ahead on truck drivers. This is a story from NBC. U.S. vaccine mandate on freight drivers coming from Canada may exacerbate auto supply chain shortage. Now, we were told here a few weeks ago, Rick, that Biden was on top of the supply chain issue and that we were working through all these things. And then we see stories like this where we are frustrating the supply chain.
So,
So which is it?
All right, let me. So this is the United States will not allow Canadian drivers to come into the United States who have not been vaccinated.
Right.
And so there's something like 12,000 unvaccinated Canadian drivers that will not be allowed to drive their trucks across the Canadian-U.S. border starting later this month.
Right.
And we're
Now-
pretty late into the month, so that means in the next week, this kicks in.
Now, here's the rub on this. Canada actually rescinded their vaccine mandate on truck drivers coming from the United States. Think about that.
So Trudeau decided there was certain things he wasn't going to risk in pushing the agenda.
And one of those was empty grocery shelves and or people out of work because you can't get parts from the United States. And so, but yes, Canada here just a few days ago, because they were going to do the very same thing, Rick. But just a few days ago, they rescinded the vaccine mandate on drivers coming from the U.S. So why is Joe Biden continuing to do this? He has the authority, and mind you, he has the authority to put this down. There's no reason to have a vaccine mandate against Canadian drivers right now. There's none.
Where is his authority to do it?
Well, it's not in the Constitution.
Did the Supreme Court back him? Who is forcing these truck drivers to be vaccinated?
Well, they're under the orders. I guess they're the orders at Border Patrol at the Canadian border right now.
Okay.
And they're saying, no, you can't come in. Why? Because Grandpa Sleepy Joe said you can't come in. So this is just so crazy, Rick.
But if somebody took it to the Supreme Court, they'd lose.
If somebody would. I don't understand why these trucking companies, well, they're in Canada, that's why they don't challenge this. And so, but the supply chain issues continue. Another Pete Buttigieg issue that's not being addressed. And so,
Yeah, once again, we're back to Pete Buttigieg,
right.
who's nursing his babies instead of dealing with real problems that he should be taking care of as the Secretary of Transportation. Here in Florida, we've got a story out of Orange County, which is the county of Orlando. Orange County health official Dr. Raul Pino placed on administrative leave because of his online comments pushing for county health officials, county employees to be vaccinated.
Right. So the BBC is reporting that according to local media, Dr. Pino wrote to employees that out of 568 Department of Health staffers in Orange County, less than 40% had gotten 2 jabs, only 77 had received boosters. So even the Department of Health in Orange County were not big fans of the gene therapy injections.
Well, why
right?
is that? If they're in the health department, certainly they would know everything about the vaccines. And only 40% of them
Right.
got 1 jab. And only 77, not 77%, 77 healthcare workers or health employees of the county health department got 2 jabs.
Now, they're not going into a lot of details in the story, Rick, about why Dr. Pino is being pushed out to administrative leave. But a couple stories that I saw implied today that he was putting pressure on employees in the Department of Health to get jabbed, even threatening jobs. And of course, here in Florida, the free state of Florida, you can't do that here. And so That seems to be where the conflict is arising for Dr. Pino.
Yeah. Hey, listen, if you, I know there are a lot of Floridians who don't want people to move into the state right now, and I get it, I understand. They're afraid that the state will change. We got a great state here. I love Florida. I've lived in Maryland, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. And I would never go back to Maryland. Never, ever, ever move back to Maryland. It used to be a conservative state. It was a very conservative state when I was a kid, but it went far left. No way I'd ever go back to Maryland. Tennessee was a wonderful state. Loved living in Tennessee, lived in Chattanooga. Texas, I still love Texas. And if the Lord told me move back to Texas, I would absolutely have no problems doing that. But Florida, I love Florida more than anything. I love living in this state. It is great. And I know a lot of Floridians don't want more people moving here because they're afraid they're going to lose the greatness of what we've got here.
Yeah, you hear the expression, don't bring your New York to our Florida.
Yeah, yeah. But if you are in a northern state, a Yankee state, you know, and you're a conservative, and you're only going to add to the greatness of Florida, I would tell you to flee the Democrat states. They're disasters. They're absolute disasters. It's only going to get worse. Doc, you told me today that U-Haul is paying people to drive empty U-Haul trucks to California because they can't get trucks to California fast enough for people who are trying to get away from the state of California.
That's exactly right. And not only people, they are driving the trucks out to California, and then U-Haul is putting those drivers on a plane to send them back to Florida and Texas to drive more trucks out. Yeah. They can't keep up with the demand. And so, but as you were saying here about Florida, Rick, a great state to live in, and it's one of the few states where we've at least had some sense of sanity.
Yeah.
We did have some moments there over the past couple of years, but it's generally things have been pretty sane here.
People are leaving New York State, they're leaving a lot of New England states.
Yes.
Actually, Vermont has increased its population, but the other New England states are losing population, particularly New York. Illinois is losing population,
right,
and California.
Yes.
And I think also, you know, Washington and Oregon, people are if you're conservative, if you're are a Bible-believing Christian, you just got to come to the place of saying, what are the odds that this is going to change over the next 30 years?
That's a great question.
It's going to change. It's going to get worse.
Yes.
It's going to deteriorate. They have destroyed many of those states. We're watching society collapse. It's happening in real time. California is imploding. It is imploding. This is every place the Democrats have control, the society is collapsing. The states that are growing are Republican.
There was a report today, Rick, that only 4 states in the country have now recovered from all the job losses from when the pandemic began. It was Florida, Texas, Idaho, and Montana. They've recovered all of their jobs. The remaining 46 states are still negative.
Yes.
They're still negative. Florida and Texas are actually ahead of where they were before this whole scamdemic began.
That's right. And look, there's talk, and I don't know if the news media is whipping up something that's not real. There's this banner that's been going on for a couple weeks that Donald Trump is bad-mouthing Governor DeSantis. I don't know if it's true or not. I've been reading the stories, but I hope it's not, because if I had to choose, I'm going with DeSantis. That is an easy choice for me. We've got a great governor, and I hope Donald Trump doesn't badmouth him and try to put him down, because Ron DeSantis is extremely popular in the state of Florida. And if there was a choice in 2024 between DeSantis and Trump, I'm going with DeSantis.
just don't have council meetings or executive meetings over in Jerusalem
Right,
anymore.
right.
Just if you take care of that, Mr. DeSantis, we're good with you.
But
So,
he's been a really good governor, and
Yes.
I'm glad he's our governor. And I think he has a very strong likelihood that he'll be the Republican nominee for president in 2024. Honestly, I don't think Donald Trump is going to make it. For political reasons, legal reasons, and maybe health reasons, since he's been triple jabbed, he may have done himself in.
and Regenerons too.
Yes.
Remember that?
So I wouldn't count on Donald Trump even being capable of campaigning in 2024.
Well, Rick, as good of news as it is that we're starting to see some pushback on some of these mandates and everything, it appears that the Democrats are just digging in deeper on what they believe, as far as they're not changing their minds at all. This is from Rasmussen today, Rick. We actually touched on this a little bit yesterday, talking about this. Democratic voters support harsh measures against the unvaccinated. So the totally indoctrinated Democratic voters that are out there
Who watch CNN and MSNBC.
had some stunning responses to a Rasmussen survey. Here's an example. We touched on a little bit of this yesterday regarding jab mandates. By the way, Organic Prepper put this list together for us based on that Rasmussen report. He said 48% of voters want a jab mandate on both employees of large companies and government agencies. 78% of the left support Biden's jab mandate, and 22% of alleged Republicans support it as well. So
Which would tell you that nearly, between 1/5, 1/4 of the Republicans are vaccinated
right.
with the gene therapy drug.
So related to fines here, 55% of the left endorse the notion of fines on unjabbed Americans. 55%, more than half of Democrats. 19% of Republicans support this position as well. And even those that are, don't have an affiliation party-wise, 25% of those voters stand behind this. In spite of the fact that you get these stories coming out of the UK now and other places, they're dropping the mandates. And yet we still have a block of people here in the United States
because they haven't dropped the propaganda from their head.
Right.
They believed it.
Now, this is one that gets scary here. Forced house arrest, which is basically what locking you in at your house is. 59% of Democrats favor house arrest for the unjabbed. 21% of Republicans favor this policy, and nearly 40% of unaffiliated voters favor this policy as well.
Well, we now know that if Maryland Governor Larry Hogan enters the Republican primaries in 2024, he'll get 21% of the vote.
At least 21. That's all he'll get. And so, some other statistics here: forced resettlement. 45% of the left favor forced resettlement of the unjabbed to government-operated facilities.
You mean like detention camps?
Or, as Hillary would say, fun camps. And so, this is another scary one here: forced silence. 48% of the left favor either or fines or imprisonment for those who question the efficacy of the jab on social media, TV, radio, online, or in digital publications. Nearly half of the left.
So what is this all about, Doc? It's about control.
Yes.
The entire coronavirus operation has been about control. They found a way to control much of the world, and they found a way to force the world to accept the social engineering that they wanted to impose.
And they found a willing populace that would go along with it.
Now, what we have, we are succeeding in stopping the agenda. We are succeeding. We're winning in stopping the agenda. The damage that's done is that their propaganda is stuck in the brains of millions of people.
Yeah, that's
Now
the real
we got to
virus.
That's the virus. That's the virus that threatens freedom. And it's lodged deep inside the brains of the left and about 1/5 of the Republicans. That's the problem we got to deal with. They've conditioned them. In the past 2 years, they've conditioned people in this country to accept the idea of arresting people in their homes for refusing an experimental gene therapy injection. They've conditioned a sizable number of the American people to accept putting people in concentration camps.
On a whatever you want to call it, virus response, whatever, with a less than 1% death rate.
But the polls don't show outrage that a virus was manufactured in the Wuhan lab and that Anthony Fauci's fingerprint is all over it.
Oh, half the Democrats would favor fining you and imprisoning
For
you
saying it.
for even saying that out loud.
Yes. So the China way has succeeded greatly in the United States. See, what we're really fighting is the China way. And the globalists are working with the Chinese Communist Party. You have the communist capitalists and the capitalist communists. They're all the same. They're working together. And they're right here inside the USA and in Canada and Great Britain and France and Germany and Australia and New Zealand. They're working with the Chinese communists to introduce the China way to the world. That's what we're fighting. That's what we're resisting.
So what happens to people or researchers or scientists, Rick, who dare to speak up about what they see in all of this?
Well, they get silenced also. They get ostracized. They could lose their careers as scientists. We have a story from the Express in London, the death of science, professor silenced for suggesting that the COVID virus could have escaped from a lab. He didn't even say it was deliberately released. He just said it could have been accidentally released from a lab. And they're trying to destroy the scientist's career.
So Angus Daglish said that anyone suggesting a non-natural origin for COVID had been silenced, warning this goes back to the days of Copernicus and Galileo. It's the death of science. The professor co-authored a paper in summer of 2020 after spotting unique fingerprints in COVID-19 samples that he believes prove they must have been manipulated in a laboratory. The work was rejected by a string of journals before finally being published in a watered-down form. Professor Daglish, an oncologist who discovered how HIV entered and killed cells in '84, then found himself ostracized and frightened. In February 2020, so nearly 2 years ago, if you remember this, Rick, The Lancet published a letter that strongly condemned conspiracy theories, suggesting that COVID-19 does not have a natural origin. So this highly influential letter, which basically chilled the scientific community, subsequently cited in thousands of scientific publications, was signed by 27 so-called experts, including the Wellcome Trust head and former SAGE member, Sir Jeremy Farrar. However, it has since emerged that 2 weeks before that letter was published, Sir Jeremy himself stated in private emails that some senior scientists believed a likely explanation was that the virus was man-made. He had led a teleconference call on February 1st of 2020. The emails discussed the call and reveal one virologist was 80% sure this thing had come out of a lab. Others shared the same view. Sir Jeremy was uncertain, stating this will remain gray unless there is access to the Wuhan lab. But virologist Dr. Ron Fouchier said further debate about such accusations would do unnecessary harm to science in general and science in China in particular.
So who were they concerned about? China.
They certainly weren't concerned about the people being impacted by all of this.
No.
They were concerned about the relationship with their Chinese friends.
Because they've been indoctrinated to the China way.
Yes.
And their snoots have been in the China trough for a long, long time.
So they purposely looked the other way when evidence was presented suggesting that it was in the lab by simply saying it's not man-made, it's not man-made, it's not man-made. We've got to call it a natural occurring event.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it didn't want to hurt China's feelings.
Yes.
So China won that war.
Yes. And maybe they didn't want to cut off the money that was flowing to them from China.
So here is the real question, Rick. So we've got the coronavirus, COVID, that's been ravaging the world for 2 years. If you call it ravaging, really that's the injections now that are causing all the deaths and everything. What if there was a real outbreak of some kind? What if there was a genuine bubonic plague outbreak or a genuine Ebola outbreak. I mean, we think things are weird now when we try to go to Walmart and get in trouble for not wearing a mask. What would happen if there was a genuine pandemic instead of this fake pandemic?
I think we can now see that the most frightening, extreme, draconian measures would be imposed.
Yes, and that people would go along with it.
And at least half of the public would back it. At least half. Now, Bill Gates, a man that knows a lot about viruses.
He made his billions off viruses,
That's right.
by the way.
He told the Financial Times that there are pandemics coming that are worse than COVID, and he would know.
Because he's a virus specialist. Well, Bill Gates has issued a warning of pandemics far worse than COVID-19 as he called on governments to contribute billions of dollars to prepare for the next global outbreak. The philanthropist said that while the Omicron and Delta variants of coronavirus were some of the most transmissive viruses ever seen, the world could have had to face a pathogen causing a far higher rate of fatalities or severe disease. And you know what? I bet he said this while smirking, because that's all he ever does when he talks about these things is he smirks while he talks about it.
The only thing I want Bill Gates to tell us is how many underage teenage girls did he rape at Jeffrey Epstein's palace? Tell us the truth, Mr. Gates. How many little teenage girls did you rape? Cough up the facts. Your wife must think something. She left you over it.
And specifically over the Jeffrey Epstein
Yes.
accusations.
It wasn't that you had an affair with an adult, which that would be private business between you and your wife. And I wouldn't bring that up. But it appears that you may have participated with Jeffrey Epstein in raping underage teenage girls. And why don't you tell us, Mr. Gates, just what you did during your time with Jeffrey Epstein? That's what I want to know. Let's see. Let's talk about about Russia. We got a lot here that we need to cover because the situation between Russia and NATO is worsening by the day. You're not hearing much of it.
No.
In the United States, but let me tell you, if you pay close attention to it, folks, it is going downhill quickly. I'm going to put number 22 on the screen. This is France 24. U.S. fears arrival of Russian troops could lead to nuclear weapons in Belarus. And we've got a couple quotes from this France 24 article.
So the U.S. is worried that the arrival of Russian troops in Belarus for exercises could become a permanent presence that might lead to nuclear weapons into the country, a senior State Department official told reporters Tuesday. So the U.S. official, speaking on grounds of anonymity, which they always do, said the size of the Russian force arriving in Belarus was beyond what we'd expect of a normal exercise. Timing is notable and, of course, raises concerns that Russia could intend to station troops in Belarus under the guise of joint military exercises in order to potentially to attack Ukraine, the official said. The official also said that changes to the Belarus constitution in a referendum next month could allow the Russian military presence to become permanent. These draft constitutional changes may indicate Belarus plans to allow both Russian conventional and nuclear forces to be stationed on its territory, the official said. But what people need to keep in mind is Belarus and Russia have entered into a mutual protection pact.
Yes.
In fact, they're moving toward just really becoming just one country at some point. And so they're moving in that direction. What the U.S. and NATO are really worried about
Doc,
is...
what option does Belarus have? They know they're going to get swallowed.
That's right.
Because the CIA will run a color revolution in Belarus. They'll assassinate Lukashenko.
Like they tried to do.
They already tried it, and they'll impose a puppet regime in Belarus. So the government of Belarus knows their days are, the countdown has begun for them. So they're just saying, let's just join Russia.
Right.
Let's just they're going to basically become a state, a province of Russia,
Right.
and have Russian troops, military bases, and nukes on their soil.
But this is also a case of the pot calling the kettle black, too. So the U.S. and NATO, they're getting upset. Well, the Russians could put nuclear weapons in Belarus. Okay.
Isn't that what Russia's saying about NATO?
That's exactly what Russia is saying about NATO. You're going to park nuclear weapons in Ukraine that could hit Moscow. What's the difference? And actually, Russia and Belarus would have a stronger case because they are actually in a treaty together to basically become one nation. There's no such treaty in place with Ukraine and NATO.
That's right. So, Doc, remember weeks ago, Russian diplomat Ryabkov said that this is about a month ago. He said there is time to work out a settlement between Russia and NATO over Ukraine. There's time, but not a lot of time.
Seemed to imply like weeks or something like that.
Yes, and we talked about it. We said, okay, he just gave us a clue that there's an open window, but it's not going to stay open very long.
Right.
And that was the gist of what he said last month. Now look at this next headline. This is TASS News Agency. Russian delegation declares start of countdown.
Right.
In wait for adoption of Russian proposals.
So the West faces a moment of truth, the TASS article goes on to say, which has started the countdown in wait for the adoption of Russian proposals on security guarantees addressed to the United States and NATO. Konstantin Gavrilov, the head of the Russian delegation at the Vienna negotiations on military security and arms control, said on Wednesday. The key word in that quote is countdown, right, Rick?
Yes. He said the countdown has started.
So Gavrilov spoke at the meeting of the OSCE Forum for Security Cooperation, which is the first in 2022, and he says this, and this is very important. There arrives a moment of truth when the West either accepts our proposals or other ways will be found to safeguard Russia's security, Gavrilov said. I am convinced that with goodwill and a willingness to compromise in any situation, it is possible to find a way out to mutually acceptable solutions. We are running out of time. The countdown begins.
There we go, folks. The Russians have told us today the clock is ticking. They have made a decision. They have a deadline. They have a date. Only the Kremlin knows the date. But he told us today the clock is ticking. We're counting down weeks, days, hours. We don't know. The clock is ticking. And he's saying, let's hope both sides can compromise and find a way out of this mess. But if we don't, we will find other ways to protect our territory. And other ways means they're going to obliterate NATO forces and assets in Ukraine and maybe some of the other countries like Poland. It's very clear what the Russians intend to do. You don't have to be a prophet to figure this out. They have been telling the world, not just for weeks or months, they've been telling the world for years, do not put weapons and troops in Ukraine and any place else on our border. And they've reached a point where, as we said weeks ago, you could feel a difference in the tone of the Russians. It's like they're exhausted.
We're done.
We're done. We're not talking anymore. We've made a decision. And I believe this is what they're saying. The Kremlin has made a decision. They've set a date. And if there is not a solution by that date, they're going to pull the trigger. They're going to pull the trigger, Doc. In the next maybe 30 days.
Well, I don't know if we got.
We don't know. That may be.
When you hear of a countdown, I'm thinking of a clock. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I think of a clock, I think of hours, not days or weeks. I mean, it sounds to me like we are in a very short period, a very short window of time.
What did Jen Psaki say last week? She said, within. I remember we said from January 14th
to February 15th.
To February 15th. That's what Jen Psaki said at the White House, that the Russian invasion could start any time. Well, we're already in that window. We're already in that time.
Do you think the Russians gave them that window and told the Biden administration, this is the period, this is the time?
I think so. I think Putin has been very blunt with Biden and has told him exactly what he's going to do. The American newspapers and television networks don't report it. Tucker Carlson's the only person I've seen and heard on national television in this country who gets it, who understands it. Everybody else is pushing the propaganda that Russia, Putin's a madman. He has to be stopped. He's going to invade Ukraine. It's all a bunch of lies. They're defending their country. And the Americans, our leadership, the ruling class of this country is blinded by pride and arrogance and lust for power and money. And it's going to, if this does not get brought under control, it will cost all of us. It doesn't matter if you're politically left or right, if you're black or green, it doesn't matter if you're straight or gay, it doesn't matter. We're all going to suffer because of it. Nobody's ever suffered when peace breaks out.
No.
Have you ever heard anyone say, oh man, I remember the days when peace broke out. Oh, it was horrible, horrible.
The only people I would think that would be upset would be the banksters out there.
Yeah, and the defense contractors. But no, peace doesn't hurt people, but war kills people, destroys people. And
well, even President Biden today, he was speaking while we were getting started here today, said that the Russians could expect great human loss if they proceed with an invasion of Ukraine.
Wait a minute, Joe Biden said this today?
Yeah, he said it today.
He said
this
what?
Afternoon.
He said the Russians
could expect great human loss if they proceed with their plans for Ukraine.
Okay, so that means Joe Biden just told Mr. Putin today, we're going to kill a lot of Russian citizens.
Yeah, that would be the message I'd be receiving. That, if I heard President Biden saying that, I'm the leader of Russia, I just got that message very clear. You're planning on killing Russians.
Then you know what I might do if I was in his shoes, Putin's shoes? I might shorten the countdown.
That's right. And are there indications that might be going on, Rick?
Well, let's take a look at the movement of Russian troops and equipment towards the Ukraine border. First one, this is from the Drive. Russia masses Iskander-M ballistic missiles near Ukraine as its buildup is almost completed.
Now, this is coming from a Ukrainian intelligence report, but there's no reason to doubt it because Ukraine seems hell-bent on getting things started with Russia one way or the other. But if I was Russia, yes, I would probably be positioning the best that I had to be able to prepare what NATO was getting ready to deliver.
Who are the idiots running Ukraine who are believing the NATO propaganda to them, telling them, hey, go ahead and start that war?
It's the puppet government that we installed in Ukraine, the
Yes.
ones that don't even speak Ukrainian.
The next one, we've got some video. We've got a montage of videos of Russian troops and equipment moving towards Ukraine, and also there are Russian military exercises underway. So some of this video that you're going to see comes from the Russian military exercises, but all of it is in preparation for war with NATO. Let's watch it. Mark, would you say by watching that video that the Russians are getting ready for war?
It looks like they're ramping up for things. Now, not to be outdone, the Ukrainians are also preparing, because Ukrainians, as much as the United States and NATO seem to want to have a war with Russia, the Ukrainians really want to have a war with Russia. And so, not to be outdone, they also have a video that they released over to their friends in the UK, and they added a rock soundtrack to their preparations, Rick. Well, let's watch this.
Well, I would say if the war is only, if it's constrained to be just between Russia and Ukraine, it's going to be a short war.
I agree with you, but, you know, something else is going on here. I don't know what it is that the U.S. and NATO are trying to protect there in the Ukraine, but it must be something that they don't want Russia digging up and finding out.
Oh, I have some ideas.
I do too.
First of all, what makes me angry is that the Russian people are being compelled to defend their homeland from the warmongering lunatics in the Bilderberg group in the Council on Foreign Relations. These people, the Russian people, should not be in this position. They haven't done anything to the West, but they're defending their country. It's just that simple. They're doing what any other patriot would do, defend their country from an invasion. And it's just sad that they're in that position right now, that their leaders are making decisions to do something they don't want to do, go to war. But they have no choice, because NATO's right on their doorstep, and if they let them establish their positions any stronger, Russia will be overtaken. They'll be invaded and overthrown, and Russia will become the new playground of the Bilderberg group,
right,
and the CFR. Just sad to see this going on. But the other issue, Doc, Ukraine. I am increasingly convinced that Ukraine is the center for a lot of nefarious activities that have been outsourced from the
agree.
United States.
Right, like a clearinghouse for corruption.
There's a lot of corrupt things have been run out of Ukraine.
I mean, we have suspicions that the DNC server was possibly parked in Ukraine. Of course, we already have Hunter Biden's connections in Ukraine.
And there may be child trafficking operations headquartered in Ukraine.
I mean, we've overthrew the Ukrainian government to install basically Nazis in.
Yes.
And so, thank you, John McCain. And so, but, you know,
They
there's
really
more
are
to this
protecting
story.
Ukraine. Yes.
Yes.
There's something there. And anybody who's touched it has been burned.
Yes.
Rudy Giuliani facing prison for investigating corruption
In Ukraine.
In
Yes.
If you try to investigate it, they will destroy you. What are they hiding in Ukraine? Well, Mr. Putin may find out. And dangerous times, folks. These are very, very, very dangerous times. All of us, beginning today, we need to be praying
Amen.
and interceding that God will restrain the war lust that's in some of these men and women in power, and that they will not be able to carry out their plans, and that peace will prevail. Nobody's going to win. Nobody wins.
Just got a report here. TASS is saying that, of course, Secretary Blinken is in Ukraine right now. He's supposed to meet with
Yes.
Mr. Lavrov later
Yes.
this week. TASS is reporting right now that U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will not provide Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov with a written response to the Russian proposals when they meet on Friday.
They may not meet. Mr. Lavrov might say, if you have nothing in writing, I'm not wasting my time with your meeting. Don't count that out. Be prepared that Lavrov cancels the meeting because Blinken is showing up empty-handed.
Right.
One more thing, I want to show you some maps. This first one is a still of Russian ships that are, this is from the Daily Mail. 6 Russian landing ships sail past Britain, sparking speculation they are bound for impending full-scale invasion of Ukraine as Kiev warns Putin has nearly completed his troop buildup. Now, there's a lot of propaganda in there, pending the Russian invasion. No, it's the Russian defense of their country.
Yeah, so we actually have a map of the travels there. So they're moving from their cold water ports in the north over to the Black Sea. And so they're passing by the UK now. And so
that's where you see that likely current location. That's the English Channel.
Right. And so they'll go around Portugal and Spain through the Mediterranean, heading toward the Black Sea to their ports there and in defense of Crimea and against the things that might be going on in Ukraine.
Okay, so I'm not a Navy guy, but how much time for those 6 landing ships to make that journey?
They left their cold water ports 2 days ago, Rick, and they passed the UK. So I would just estimate less than a week, maybe 5 days, based just on distance right there. And
well, that helps you understand the countdown clock.
So a map showing the route the 6 landing ships could possibly be taking from Russia's second Baltic Sea base of Kronstadt to Ukraine ahead of a full-scale invasion. The vessels were pictured at the Great Belt Bridge in Denmark on Monday, and if heading to Ukraine, are likely to have already transited the English Channel. And so
they made it from Denmark to Great Britain in 3 days.
Right. So that gives us 5 to 6 days that we're talking about to transit the Mediterranean. That Daily Mail article also had another picture, and it showed the concentration of forces that are building up around Ukraine. When you really start to consider the amount of armament, just one crazy person firing off a rocket or shooting down a helicopter or doing something idiotic, you could have a full-scale war, massive land war, and maybe even nuclear war starting off. This is a massive number of troops, right?
Yeah, so Doc, looking at the top of the map, directly into the words Daily Mail, 100,000 Russian troops positioned near the Ukrainian border with 1,300 tanks, 1,680 artillery, 3,700 armored vehicles. And then you see under that in Klinsky, 4,000 troops. To the right, under the tank on the far right, 2,000 troops, 4,000 troops, 5,000 in Volgograd. The tank image says is describing the Russian tanks that are available, their range and their top speed. And then further south, you see 35,000 Russian aligned separatists. These are Ukrainians who are loyal to Russia, living in Ukraine and Donetsk. So there are 35,000 there. You also see 5,000 troops and 4,000 in Rostov. And then under that, 33,000 troops in Crimea. And then the Russian Black Sea Fleet. I would say Ukraine could be toast pretty fast.
And if you count Belarus over on the, it'd be on the left side of the map there that you don't see, there's also forces loyal to Russia that are stationed there. So actually, Ukraine is facing, really 7 different fronts in having to, withstand anything that Russia perceives to be an aggression toward them.
All right, so the Ukrainian forces, 255,000 active duty troops, 900,000 reserves, 13,865 tanks and armored vehicles, 67 warplanes, 34 attack helicopters, 13 warships. The Russians will take them out quickly. Now, the question is, will Joe Biden and the European leaders like Macron and France and Germany and Great Britain, will they go to war against Russia?
Do they have the stomach for it is the question.
My guess, Doc, is no, they're not going to go to war. I believe the Russians are going to take out the military assets in Ukraine. And then afterwards, the world is going to be, it's going to be a different world, and the U.S. and NATO will be demanding the strictest sanctions on Russia. And then I think it starts to get intense at that point, because if they start talking about, again, cutting off the SWIFT bank wire system, things like that, I think Putin's going to say, "Would you like a dose of this?" I don't think they're going to go to war immediately. I think they're going to let him attack, and then they're going to regather. And they're going to say to the world, "We told you, we were right. We told you." Now, the smartest thing Putin could do is take out the NATO weapons and then withdraw his troops and say, "We're not interested in Ukraine. We accomplished our mission."
Right.
What did George Herbert Walker Bush do with the Iraq War? When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Regardless of what you think about George Herbert Walker Bush, the way he handled that operation was brilliant. It really was. Looking back, his son couldn't do anything like that, but the Papa Bush, actually what he did was quite brilliant. He amassed a global coalition. He told Saddam, "We're going to remove you from Kuwait." He marched in, General Schwarzkopf, remember? They liberated Kuwait, and they chased the Iraqi soldiers back into Iraq, and then Bush ordered Schwarzkopf, "Stop."
Yeah, because there was pressure on, let's go ahead and go all the way to Baghdad.
Let's go all the way in. And President Bush said, "No, stop." The mission was get him out of Kuwait. Years later, the Zionists that were around George W. Bush pressured him.
Let's go ahead and go to Baghdad.
Let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and kill Saddam Hussein. But what George Herbert Walker Bush did, whether you support that war or not, I'm just saying the way he managed it was brilliant. He set forth his demands. He carried out his threat. He accomplished the mission, and he stopped it when he had accomplished the mission.
Right.
He did not allow it to, bleed into another mission creep. All right. He knew, hey, this could become a massive war if I let this go on. So I think Putin's going to do the same thing. I think he's already told Biden, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take out NATO troops. I'm going to take out NATO weapons. I'm going to, and then I'm going to leave. Because NATO will be screaming, Russia has invaded Ukraine. We told you he was going to invade. And politically, the smartest thing he'll be able to do is simply withdraw and say, mission accomplished.
Right.
Don't come back and do this again.
Because if Mr. Putin really wanted to hurt NATO, all he had to do is turn a couple valves off, really.
Oh, yeah.
A couple pipelines.
Yes.
Right now. I mean, he could do it right now. The pipeline going to Ukraine, the pipeline going to Germany, all he has to do is turn the spigot off.
Yes.
And we'll see how quick, NATO responds to that.
Doc,
That's real war there.
And some of the European leaders are going to think twice about a real war with Russia, because they're going to think, do we really want to do round 2? Do we want to push it? Because there will be the demand, the war hawks in the Bilderberg Society, the Council on Foreign Relations, the bloodthirsty warmongers are going to be demanding retribution. But I think there are going to be others in Europe who are going to say, I don't think we want to do this.
Right.
He just carried out an attack, and it was devastating on Ukraine. Do we want, Germany's been devastated before.
Yes.
Twice they started world wars.
And Germany has also been reluctant to add troops and military equipment to the current situation in Ukraine. In fact, I don't know if you caught this story today or not, but the UK is flying military equipment to Ukraine.
Yes.
And if you look on the flight radar maps, they're flying around Germany. It could go a straight line over Germany.
So Germany's not allowing them to do it.
Not even allowing to fly over, not allowing the UK to fly over Germany and to take military equipment to Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, Great Britain, without Tony Blair, George W. Bush would never have invaded Iraq in that disastrous war. So Great Britain played a big role in that horrible war on the Iraqi people. Okay, we've given you a lot of information. It's getting late. Thank you for watching True News. As always, we appreciate your prayers and your financial support. God bless you. We love you very much. We appreciate all that you do for us. And without you, we just couldn't do this. We are dependent on our audience to support us. If you've never helped us, our address is on the screen. Why don't you make a decision, make a pledge to Almighty God that every month in 2022, you're going to send something to support True News. You can do it online, or you can call the phone number, or you can send a check by mail. Whatever is best for you. But just make a decision. You're going to do something that you realize, hey, time is getting short. We've got to spread the message that Jesus Christ is coming back. We're on the verge of world war. We're on the verge of pestilence and plagues, the very things that Jesus said would be taking place before he comes back.
On the final day. Speaking of final day.
Final day. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Final Day, the book that I wrote about the last day of mankind. The hardback first edition is sold out. We now have the paperback second edition. I've improved the book. I've added new material. It's really got a lot of good new stuff in it, and it is at the printers right now. We're expecting copies. This is a paperback. We're expecting them within weeks. I'm going to say early February. We should have the first shipment coming in. You can pre-order right now. There's a banner on TrueNews.com. It's for the paperback second edition. The paperback is $19.95, and as I did with the hardback, if you want a personal autograph We're asking for a donation of $100. But you can go ahead right now and pre-order.
You can do it on the website right now.
Yes, you can do it today. It is live today. We're now accepting pre-orders for the second edition of Final Day. And I'm telling you, I really put a lot of new material in it. I'm going to produce a video course. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out. They got an audio book coming, an ebook that's coming. There's a lot that will be rolled out in the next 2 months. Check it out. Go to truenews.com. Look at the banner at the top. Click that banner. You can learn more about the book. See you tomorrow. God bless.
God bless you.